welcome back from lunch, everybody. Thanks for coming to this session on lessons from renewable energy mini-grids for energy access. If you've been following along the logical progression of this track, you'll know that in our last session before lunch, we talked about business models. And some of the cases there were business models for mini-grids. But this time we're going to have a more holistic approach and hear lessons from a variety of dimensions of the mini-grid experience. And then we're going to do something a little bit different this time and try to stimulate more of a discussion between our panelists. When we met as a group yesterday, we got this lively discussion going, and Mari was saying, well, we should really try to replicate this during our session and then involve the audience as well. So we'll try to see if we can actually do this on command. So with that, I'll turn the floor, I'm going to turn Molly the floor.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm hoping that this will be a not only engaging but lively discussion. We're trying to shake things up a little bit from the typical question and answer session and really have a dialogue among the speakers and then including the audience at the end. So I'm not going to speak too long here because I really think that you all are here to listen to our speakers. So just to quickly touch on the theme of this session, we're going to be talking about renewable energy microgrids and providing access to electricity, specifically in off-grid remote areas. As many of you know, the solar home system space has actually taken off and really rapidly expanded as a service for providing energy access. And mini-grids are really starting to follow a similar path to really being a viable, affordable, and sustainable source of energy access in off-grid areas. However, as you know, there are also many challenges and barriers to the rapid expansion of mini-grids. So today we're going to hear from our speakers as they talk about their lessons learned and experiences in terms of really developing and operating mini-grid systems in the field. So our first speaker will be Anjal Nirola. And he is the general manager at GAN Power, and there he oversees the company's R&D and product strategy. This includes business development, design, and engineering. Prior to GAN Power, Anjal consulted for the National Academy and Ministry of Science and Technology in Nepal. So thank you. We're looking forward to hearing from you, Anjal.
Hi. Thanks for the introduction, Mali. So today I'm going to talk about this new approach of energy access that we're trying through productive end use, and I'll briefly talk about like how we ended up with this idea and what I see as potential moving forward. So this is a 70 kilowatt of microgrid that we deployed last year with the help from ADB. And the microgrid is working very fine. We're generating enough revenue, but what we realized during this process was that the development cycle for the microgrid was quite large. It was mostly because we had to raise a lot of debt. The communication with the community took quite a while, and the fact that we'll continuously require subsidies for a long period of time and without any government policies to support that, it's quite difficult to duplicate. So this brought us to like some of the productive end use loads that were actually operating in with the microgrid, right? So where most of the revenue being generated in the microgrid is through these productive end use loads. So the grinding mills, 2 kilowatt commuter center, there's a BTS tower, a petrol pump. They're actually generating significant revenue for the microgrid. The household loads not so much. So this happened, so immediately after the deployment of microgrid, we went to a very rural part of Nepal where we were installing a solar water pump under a leasing model, right? So we went into this area and it was very dry. The rivers were all drying up because of mostly being hydropower dams being built up in the mountains. And this is the result of all the water being stuck on the mountains. The water requirement becomes very high. People need water for irrigation, for drinking water, and the wells are being dug deeper every year, right? So people are going deeper and deeper, but they don't have enough electricity to pump the water out. So this is the way in which the water is currently being dug up. It's a diesel generator operating for 5 to 12 hours daily for irrigation, and it consumes significant amount of diesel per day. So, and what happens is usually like there's a water entrepreneur and he charges a cost of rupees 250 per hour for providing this water to all the farmers, which is about $2.5, which is quite substantial. So what we did was we replaced the diesel pump with a solar version of it, providing exactly the same amount of water. And what we ensured was the cost of the lease was actually less than what he was previously paying for diesel by 10 to 15%. So he was pretty happy. So we installed the system, has no batteries. We conducted pilot at 3 different sites. And the operational data and then the learnings were quite helpful for us in understanding that, you know, with solar, with just private money, without relying on grant too much, you could actually do a lot of these projects. And I talked about the background before, right? There are more than 300 areas in Nepal where I could duplicate. Just in that one particular district. There are thousands more all over the country. And then this brings me back to the other microgrid that we had installed in, the other productive end use in the microgrid that we had previously installed, right? So the cyber cafe there charges people $1 per hour of internet use, and if you just convert the value in terms of dollar per kilowatt hour, that's $10. I mean, he obviously has other hidden costs, but the margins to be made are quite huge with productive end use loads. The grinding mill, on the other hand, they're charging $3.5 per kilowatt hour, and it does not require that much extra appliance. So with a VFD-based appliance or solar just tied to a grinding mill, you can actually make a decent return with just private money. So this brought us to an idea of productive end use powered specifically with solar, right? So what we're trying to do here is tie up solar with one productive end use appliance. One business appliance could be a grinding mill, could be a cyber cafe, could be a water pump, could be a telemedicine center. And this can actually be replicated with very little donor support. So what we are trying to do here is, first of all, get the appliance there, get it to generate revenue, and then add microgrids in the second phase. So it's sort of a phased approach that we're looking at. And why we're doing this, right? So we want to move on from the one-off projects that we see are typically being deployed in all over the world. You know, you get some grants, some subsidies to implement such projects, but it's very difficult to replicate that. So what we want to do is we want to use these productive end uses, turn them into a standardized unit so that we can sort of try and commoditize it, right? Commoditize it. So rather than talking about projects, we're talking about products here. And then once we can identify what are the sensitive factors, right? What are the variables? And we do a sensitivity analysis and identify what those sensitive parameters are and move towards standardization of such a plans. So basically what I'm saying is for electrification to happen and for it to really scale up and to expand, bootstrap approaches, the low cost services that provide immediate value to the users are much easier to scale. At least you don't have to rely for donor support all the time. You can do that with your private money. And by aggregating these projects together, turning it into a large portfolio, looking at a particular geographical area, and slowly building on it and adding other household loads to it. That's the structure that we're looking at while moving forward. But this requires more than just EPC being able to do it, right? Intersectoral collaboration is a must, especially if you're working on water pumps. You need to know what depth the water is at, what kind of crops they're growing. So building all these information together and developing an open source platform where you can share these ideas we feel is the way towards replicating this in Nepal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andal. I was really impressed that you were way under time here. Good job. Hopefully that sets the stage for everyone else on the panel. I really enjoyed your presentation, and I'm looking to dive into some of the details of your talk a little bit later when we get into the discussion, especially in pairing the need for appliances, super efficient appliances, with energy access and bringing those two discussions together and really ensuring that we're talking about productive end use. And I'm really excited to hear about this phased approach more and to really dive into that. So our next speaker is Peter Lilienthal. Peter is the CEO of Homer Energy. Since 1993, he has been the developer of the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, Homer, which is a hybrid power optimization software, which has been used by over 122,000 energy practitioners in 193 countries. Peter was a senior economist with international programs at NREL from 1990 to 2007, and he was the lead analyst and one of the creators of NREL's Village Power programs. His work has included designing and teaching courses at the university level, project development of independent power projects, and consulting to industry and regulators. So I look forward to hearing from you, Peter.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to give you some insights that we've learned from 20 years of modeling mini-grids and microgrids. But first, let me talk a little bit about who is Homer. And as Molly mentioned, it's been around for over 20 years, starting with the NREL's Village Power Program. In 2008, we licensed it from the lab. Homer Energy is now a private company with the exclusive license to support, enhance, and distribute the software. The map shows the distribution of projects. Just over the last year and a half, that 15,000 different microgrid projects or mini-grid projects have been modeled with Homer. And the graph shows the explosive increase in interest just in the last few years. So why did we create it? Well, 20 years ago I looked and said, one of the obstacles we're going to have is too many choices, which is a good thing, but people want to know what's best. And the answer, unfortunately, is that it depends. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. So you have to look at your site-specific resources, you have to look at what your energy requirements are, the load profiles and the reliability requirements, and the technology keeps changing. It keeps getting better, which is great, but it just adds to the confusion. A confused mind says no, so our job is to fit those pieces together. We look at conventional resources like diesel, but anything that turns fuel into power will work. We look at the full range of renewable resources. Solar is the most popular, but we also can look at wind, biomass, and hydro. Lots of different storage technologies, and that's just getting more and more promising storage technologies coming to the market. And load management is often overlooked, but can be a really valuable, really important piece of the puzzle to fit together. So we've become an industry standard for designing hybrid microgrids, and funding organizations like the World Bank, the Alaska Energy Authority, the Horizon Power, and other utilities with responsibility for remote areas require that proposers don't show me your spreadsheet, which I don't know anything about, show me your results in Homer. At its core, it's a production cost model that simulates how a system will operate hour by hour or minute by minute if you have the data, typically for a whole year, but our new version can do an entire project life, 20, whatever that is, 25, 30 years. How does the system operate? How much fuel is it going to use? How are you going to charge and discharge the batteries? What are the O&M and replacement costs going to be? You do that for hundreds or thousands of different systems and rank them, typically by life cycle cost, but by anything you want. That's the optimization layer, tells you what's best. But these projects often have lots of uncertainty. It's hard to collect good data. So we built the whole thing around sensitivity analysis to tell you how robust is your solution. In case you're wrong about, and you're going to be wrong about things like fuel prices and what's the load really look like. So the sensitivity analysis is a really important piece. We also think it's useful as a communication tool because we talk to renewable advocates that want to do 100% renewable, and we talk to diesel mechanics who the whole concept scares the hell out of them. And these folks are coming from completely different places. Likewise, we talk to power engineers who have their very, very detailed engineering tools, other software tools. that don't consider economics at all, and we talk to the finance community that have their spreadsheets and don't deal with the technical issues at all. If you want to get a project developed, you need something to bridge that gap. Homer fits in the middle and acts as a tool that everybody, and a common language, everybody can get around the table, and they've got something in common, and that's the only way projects get developed. So you may be familiar with an older version of Homer. Just very quickly, some of the new things. We have an optimization algorithm that's new, so you don't have to deal with the search space if you don't want to. We have a wizard to help you get started, to make it really simple. We can model unreliable grids, which we didn't used to be able to do. We have our battery model takes temperature into consideration. We've got a lot of criticism in the past for not doing that, so it affects the lifetime and the capacity of the batteries. I already mentioned the multi-year. And we have a new application programming interface, so if you have your own control algorithm, you can plug that into Homer, and we're working with ABB on that as our sort of launch client for that. So to get on to some real insights that we've developed doing this, tariffs are really important. They need to be affordable, not just to the consumer, but also the producers need to have a profitable business, and you can't commit the government to an unsustainable fiscal burden. They need to be equitable so that the most of the subsidy goes to the poor. And they need to be efficient, which is often overlooked how important it is to maintain incentives for efficient appliances. So one way to do that is to subsidize the capital cost to reduce the operating cost. The tariff covers the operating cost. And here's some results from Homer. Each one of those dots is a separate system that we analyzed. So over in the lower right is the pure diesel system, low capital cost, high operating cost. And each of those yellow triangles is an efficient system design depending upon how the trade-off that you want between capital cost and operating cost. A tariff structure that I personally think is very good is you subsidize the renewable portion, which provides a certain amount of power with very little operating cost. And then you can have a threshold. You could cut off, and some developers too say, okay, nobody this is your allotment for the day, and you get. But alternatively, you could have a full cost recovery for consumption beyond that threshold. The wealthier households that are going to be buying additional appliances are going to use more power. It's going to end up running the diesel more. They should be paying the full cost recovery. And this also maintains the incentive for energy efficiency, and it has load growth paying its own way as well. So as the load grows, costs are going to increase, but the revenue is going to increase as well, and you can fund system expansion in a sustainable manner this way. Another thing that falls out of the analysis is different load profiles have different impacts on system cost. So productive uses, which are typically during the day, are mostly using solar power. These are generalizations because every day is different, and they'll still use some power from the battery and some power from the diesel, but it's mostly solar. That's less expensive than meeting the evening load, which isn't going to use the solar directly, and during peak loads is when you're more likely to use the diesel. So unfortunately, the residential load is the more expensive load to serve, and nighttime is running off the battery. Water pumping is a very special case in a hybrid system like this, because a high penetration renewable system is going to have excess energy. And if you have a large storage tank for the water, that's a very efficient way to meet your water pumping load. It's much cheaper to store water than to store electricity. These results fall out of analysis with Homer very clearly, so that water pumping can almost be free depending on the size of your water tank and your system design. So I mentioned renewable penetration, and it's sort of a pet topic because it's very confusing. People throw around, oh, it's 30% renewable, 50% whatever. In Homer, we have 8 different definitions of renewable penetration. I won't go into them all, but there's a factor of 10 difference between different ways that term can be defined. So rather than define it in terms of percentage, I'd like to think of it in terms of system architecture. And a low penetration system is very, very simple. the amount of PV is very small, and the variability it introduces is comparable to what the variability of the load. So you don't have to do anything. You're not going to save huge amounts of fuel, but it's a very simple system. As you add more renewables, you're going to have to start curtailing your renewables to protect your diesels. And as you add more and more, you probably should be redispatching your diesels. It depends how many you have, how big your system is. And when you get to very high penetrations, what you'd really like to do is turn off your diesels. That's where the big fuel savings comes. That's where the O&M savings comes. But it requires a completely different system architecture, different kind of inverter, etc. A lot of people are interested in 100% renewable systems. And there's some big advantages to avoiding fuel supply issues. There's diesel fuel is easy to steal. That's a big problem. It vastly reduces your maintenance requirements. The appeal is obvious, but there's some disadvantages as well, because you can't really build a battery bank big enough to meet the longest period of cloudy weather that you're going to have. And you also need to manage your batteries. They need to be brought to a full state of charge every once in a while, which is easy to do with the diesel and difficult to do unless you've oversized your PV. So they're applicable for small systems. Here's a graph of sensitivity analysis we did. Unmet load is along the x-axis, diesel fuel prices on the right axis. It shows you what combinations 100% renewables is most cost effective for. I'd be remiss not to mention other services that we provide, because we do a lot of education, capacity building and training. We can help you do your analysis for you if you want, or we can work together, which is sort of training, a combination of consulting and training. And we have this huge user base. We have a newsletter that goes out to 87,000 people, so we're a great way to connect the suppliers with the market. Finally, I just want to reiterate the really key point, which is there's no one size fits all. You really need to look at what's this site need? What are the energy requirements? What are the resource requirements, etc. There's lots of ways to think about tariff structures, and you really need to understand the economics of the system to do that. And we have a 30-day free trial, so you should try it out for yourself. 43 seconds over, so that's okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. I think Homer is just an incredibly exciting and useful tool, and for the very reason that you say. I mean, these systems are not one-size-fits-all system. They range in size, they range in location, and I think that this is a tool that should and could be used expansively. So I'm really excited about its growth. Next, we're going to hear from Andre Sasato. Andre is a senior vice president at IDP. He has over 20 years of experience with project development, design, inspection, and audit, implementation, and financing renewable energy systems. This includes engineering and management positions within various industries, including consumer electronics, automotive, and energy. Andre has developed clean energy policies and regulations, as well as the clean energy fund structures. His recent work includes social and economic impact assessments of energy access and technology development for rural infrastructures. All right, thank you, Andre. We're excited about it.
Boy, I don't know how to follow up with that. That's a good introduction. So just to make sure that everybody knows, so my talk today is really aimed towards creating a national energy plan. So not necessarily on how to create a system, but really how to plan out the system. And as what everybody has mentioned, there's no one size fits all. This is kind of specifically on touching on the mini grid. So first of all, what is energy access? I mean, we see these pictures all the time in reports, in articles. They're great, but is it energy access? I mean, have we given them access to energy? Or these pictures, these pictures give us the warm and fuzzies inside. It makes us feel good. It's for some of us, it's sexier than Playboy or Playgirl magazines. But again, is it energy access? What does it mean? What is it? How do we get there? Do we have a goal? A lot of people talk about equal opportunity to service, equal access, equal price, etc. But for my own opinion, having gone to I probably have access to data to over 300, maybe 400 different villages. for me, the key is that we need to have equal opportunity for everybody to be able to grow to grow and increase their economic status, that their quality of life has increased. We need to be able to give them that equal opportunity, and in this case, through access to energy. Lots of these things, lots of solutions out there. The very, kind of not bottom as in they're not worth it, but the very smallest systems are these lanterns. Having gone to many different places, these are perfect solutions. Sometimes for 2 or 3 years, that's all they need, right? But do we know that is really all they need? Can we help them to grow? Is this helping them to grow, or can they be more? Can they do more if we give them more? Sometimes on a natural progression, they actually need more. They're asking for more. We're giving them something and they're saying, hey, that's not enough. I want more. And they go to a small home system. And then beyond that, they have to go to a mini grid where more access to energy is available. But is mini grid the ultimate solution? Some people say it is, but there are lots of challenges with mini grid as well. We've talked about it a little bit earlier. And once we have a mini grid, everybody says grid extension is a mini grid killer, especially on a business model. Lots and lots of business models out there that are building mini grids are saying, hey, I want a 15-year concession, I want a 20-year concession, I don't want the public grid to come in, I want me and me alone to be able to provide electricity to these regions, to these areas, because I need to make my money back. That's absolutely perfect. I mean, that's what's needed. That's how we get private investors to come in, right? But is there a different way? Is there a different method where we can say, okay, well, mini grid can come, but when it's natural for the public grid to come in, that we don't stifle that growth, that we're allowing the public utility to come in, but at the same time, the mini grid are still making their money as well. Actually, the brand new off-grid regulation in Uttar Pradesh is actually one of the great solutions for that specific country, for that specific state, perhaps. We can't just take that and say, okay, I'm going to take that for Indonesia, I'm going to take that for Philippines. We have to look at all the different details and figure out what makes it work in India and what would make it work in our own respective countries. So I'm sure everybody's heard that quote, the goal is just a dream unless there's a plan. I want to go a step further, that there's lots of plans out there, but lots of them doesn't have any actionable items in there. They're just a plan. I want to be 95% electrified by 2030, and that's my plan. Well, how do you get there? What do you do with it? The biggest thing about planning, especially if you've done project management before, is that without any data with which you base your plan on, you can't make a plan. Now, before we go anywhere, I really want to stress this out. Technology is not a problem. You give me any problem in any industry, I'll give you a technology solution for it. Don't tell me that, Andre, it also has to be cheap. I can't do that for you, but I can give you a solution, right? You've been here for a week. You've heard many solutions, technical solutions out there, and it's okay. It's great. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't have enough data often to look at how do we electrify a country? How do we electrify a big region of a country or a state? Resource availability and needs assessment are the two basic things we need. What's the resources in the area we want to electrify? If there's hydro potential, why are we putting in solar PV and storage? I'm sure Peter can help with Homer with that, whether it's better with hydro or wind. But we need to know that. What are the resources in that region that will be best served, to be used for electricity? What are the needs? Why are we giving a village or a region a full-on microgrid or mini grid when really their electricity need is very, very low? Or we're giving them small home system and lanterns when there's actually already crop processing available, ice making needed in there, or cold storage, right? So we need to look at all of these and make sure that it's working. Just a quick story here. This is an island of Lombok. The picture of a hotel there is actually a special economic zone. There's not enough electricity there to support that special economic zone. So one of the real good way to electrify this system, or this island actually, is, well, we know we want to electrify the special economic zone because the load center is there. We know where the load is, so we provide generation there. If there's any excess, we sell it to the grid. But we don't always know that, especially in villages. Villages are just a legal definition of an area. We don't, you know, the density, the population density is not uniform. So we need to know where everybody lives, where the clusters of homes are, and then we can plan for electrification. And this is just a really good, this is just one list that I can think of what is needed to design a mini grid system that is forward-looking. We don't want something like this. I mean, it looks okay, but you know, just kind of the poles on the left and the right is not going to last very long there. Or this one. We can't do business as usual. We have to upgrade it. Some of the things that we've done in the past work, but lots of things doesn't work. So we got to stop doing it. We got to make something new. We got to, especially on the planning part, how do we plan for something new that is not quite there yet? The technology is there, the business model is there, but it's never been planned before. So here's a typical mini grid. Lots of separate systems, right? In Indonesia, there's, depending on some sources, there's 12,800 unelectrified villages. 10 years from now, do we want 12,800 mini grids, separate little ones? I hope not. I hope we can do better than that. Just one little another example. There's a little tiny dot there. It's the island of Alor. There's 6 mini grids in there run by the utility company. That little island already has 6, and that represents less than 0.06% of the Indonesian population. Here's what we need to be doing. Shared access energy, connect the little mini grids when it makes sense. Or when the mini grids are owned by different systems, when you connect to the public grid, you can actually run it in several different modes. Sell excess energy, do it as an IPP, or close it off and stay, I'm a mini grid, I'm staying on my own, but I'm going to use the public grid as a backup system. You can do that as well. When all the mini grids are owned by the same system, you can connect it together and have one switch going out to the grid and run it this way as a much bigger power plant. So again, once we have those kind of things, grid extension is not something to be feared of. It's not something that's an enemy of mini grids. It can actually be a partner. How do we make a mini grid business model that works when the grid comes in so that the national growth is working together? Now, here's the key thing that is really needed to make all of this work. Not technology, otherwise this slide would be different, but my slide is all about financial engineering. That's the real barrier. How do we get the risk away from the project developer into where everybody can get a win-win solution? So the end result is we want 100% electrification, but if we can do it, you know, let's utilize the public grid as something that's a partner that is using the public grid as something that can help instead of hindering. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. That was great. I really enjoyed some of the graphics that you used throughout your slide presentation, and I think this is really important. Presentation that really touches on many of the other speakers up here is the way that you actually plan and look at the system from start to end. So our next speaker will be Pushkar Manandhar. Pushkar is an energy project officer in the Nepal resident mission of the Asia Development Bank. His current major task is to implement energy projects of various natures, support in processing new energy projects, and promote policy and other measures for better energy sector response. He's also the energy sector focal person for the Nepal resident mission of the ADB. Prior to joining ADB, Pushkar served as a consultant to the ADB, worked with Practical Action and the Government of Nepal Alternative Energy Promotion Center for various projects funded by the EU, UNDP, and the World Bank.
Yeah, thanks, Mo, for quick introductions. Actually, I'm very pleased to share you some of our lessons learned from in Nepal, in mini-grid, and also some of the work that Asian Development Bank is doing in Nepal in their mini-grid development. So, so let me start with the quick backgrounds on mini-grid's status in Nepal. So you know, like Nepal is very well known for this off-grid electricity systems, and Nepal has produces many best practices in the regions, especially this community-based rural electrification model, which has been replicated in several other countries in Asia, South in the regions, and even other countries like Africa, especially the technology based upon micro hydro. So we have already promoted more than 2,500 numbers of micro hydro, most based upon the hydro-based small micro hydro systems. And total we have installed more than 25 megawatts of such systems, but we have more potential and more things need to be done. And we have the policies, guidelines, standards in place for this micro hydro development based mini-grid systems. And probably this may be the reasons why this the recent study carried out by the World Bank on readiness for investment in sustainable energies ranked Nepal as the second in terms of readiness for investing in this sustainable energies access. And this off-grid system will be very crucial for Nepal in coming days also. Basically two reasons, because Nepal is very mountainous country with lots of remote places which can be accessed by only through the walking, and not only like a few hours of walking, several days of walking. And another reason is mini-grid. Like for those reasons, maybe the standalone could be the ideal candidates. But like for if you want to use this energy for the productive use applications, then this mini-grid systems will be imperative and remains very much critical for those settings. And approaches. So our approaches for development of mini-grids have been mostly based upon the hydropowers. Earlier, the Nepal Electricity Authority, the only utility that is responsible for generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity, has been developing such kind of mini-grids to power the rural headquarters. But now, like there has been limited engagement of NEA, so that there has been a gap for a while, but that gap is fulfilled by the community-based electrification model. And which is now very much success, but they have their own limitations, such as their limited operations and management capacity of this community-based electrification systems, and the quality of the systems that is developed through the community-based system. And other things is the private sector engagement. So we see, the private sector has been heavily engaged in this sector, but like their role has been mostly limited as equipment suppliers. So we would like to see the private sector coming also as not as an equipment supplier, but also as a energy service provider. And the recently subsidy policies that was approved, I think the month back, provided a very solid framework for the private sectors to engage in the sector as emerge as energy service provider. And other issues is the planning and implementation. So in Nepal, we don't have this distribution system master plan, so that there has been ad hoc, and there is some kind of competition between on-grid and off-grid. Such things are there, and poor coordinations, the lack of coordinations, and also the poor readiness with project implementations. This has been issued due to this lack of proper planning. So the requirements is now as I told you, Nepal is kind of champions in terms of mini hydro, micro hydro technologies, but there are lots of reasons places where this hydro don't have potential. So in those areas, provide access to the modern energy sources. These other form of electrification options need to be promoted, like wind mini-grid, solar mini-grid, wind solar mini-grid. Of course, there has been some kind of engagement is there, but this need to scale up learnings from others. And in terms of this, even for the hydros, like the critical requirements is now scaling up in terms of size and numbers. But there are still lots of places to be electrified, and if you want to achieve this, the target of this energy access by 30, this C4R target, then this needs to be scaled up. And this is very, very critical and burning issues for Nepal now. Like Nepal is increasingly scarcity of these grant resources. Okay, for example, the ADB doesn't provide any grant resources for the Nepal, same with the World Bank, and bilateral grants are also like being depleted continuous basis. So the Nepal has to come up with some kind of business model that will shift, that will take away from the subsidy-based model to the credit-based model. That is very, very critical for Nepal. And other roles is the private sector roles, so we need to be more enhanced. Their roles need to be more enhanced. And for this, the clarity in policies and regulations will be required. And when we develop this policy and regulatory, so based upon the lessons learned from other countries, in ADB, DMC countries, so the regulatory mechanisms shall not create the burdens for these small projects and also for the regulator itself. So this needs to be very carefully crafted. And another issue, like I told you, like 2,500 numbers of microhydro we have promoted, and 11% of these areas has been encroached by the national grid. So it means that this mini hydro system has become redundant and not being used. So it's very important that these hydro power systems are connected to the grids. And anyway, this Nepal utility is not willing to connect those hydro powers or mini hydro mini grid systems into its grid. Basically, two reasons: because they were not compatible to grid. That is, their security features, protection requirement doesn't meet their standards, and the quality of power is not that, because due to the use of rudimentary technologies like these induction generators that deteriorates the voltage profile of the grids, and others issues like other issues. And other issues of the utility is the managing expectations after the grid connection. So they fear that communities will expect more, so one need to be connected to the grid. So they expect 24/7, even which is even utility is not able to provide in other part of our countries. So, and other issues is the major concern of bank who wish to finance this mini grid projects as a credit line. They keeps on asking what will happen if the grid comes in the project area. So there is no policies clarity. So this need to be also clear. And absolute need, when we develop this mini hydro in coming days, this need to be grid ready. So there is no options no longer. So the technical standards requirements has to be updated. And another things is this is one of the pilot projects where Nepal has recently completed. So connection of several mini grid projects into one, just like Andrea in his speech earlier mentioned. So we have connected. So in one of the district called Baglong, so we have connected 6 mini grid systems into one, and their size ranges from 8 kilowatt to 28 kilowatt maximum. So this will allow higher power availability that will allow those community people to use increased productive use application, because without these things they have to be limited up to 6 kilowatt or maximum 27 kilowatt. But now with these integrations they can go up to around 100 kilowatt system. So this could be also the desired options for the utility to connect into the grid, because they don't have to deal with several numbers of these small systems. So they can so in this figure you can see in the right side there is a triangular things, rectangular circle. So this is the place where they are now planning to connect these mini grid systems into the utility grid. And other requirement is enhancing the readiness. This has been the problems for Nepal, not only in this energy sectors, but in the other sector also. Enhancing readiness is very, very critical. So you see the figure here, in the right side, left side, you will see that there is time lag between the time when subsidies kick in and when the actual kilowatt will come. But so So there is a difference of timelines of 2 years. But like if we shift that things by 2 years, then you can see very like a fantastic correlation. So like, but it doesn't mean that like there will be kilowatt output once the subsidy will be kicked in. But like 2 years is too long actually, and we are spending so much time in. We have already spent so much time in bringing this process into the planning phases, preparing this. So this needs to be sorted, and for that the required agencies need to identify this prospective projects and prepare them in advance. And this is where like Asian Development Bank is very much focusing and helping Nepal and other DMCs by providing instrument called like a project preparative facility grants or other project design advance. Such things are we are coming up with. So this is my second last. So ADB's, I will now briefly take you through ADB's ongoing effort. So we have been doing lots of pilot projects for testing new business models. So one of that, like Anjal in his presentation mentioned, so we have supported the Compower in implementing the projects with innovative business model with higher private sector engagement and new technologies. So we have been like supporting Nepal to test for this promoting new kind of technologies like wind solar hybrid systems, like smart grid in the mini grid system. And we are supporting also like a government a lot in improving the sector governance, private sector participation, and leveraging different kind of resources. For example, we don't have grant, but like we are helping government of Nepal to pull the grant resources from various other resources, which will be used as a subsidy. And we are providing the loan money that will be used as a credit line. So providing other kind of support like technical assistance, and we are also working with the co-financiers, lots of co-financiers for scaling up. Yeah. Okay. For the project reference, this is one of the very recently approved project through which we try to solve some of these ongoing issues. For example, in our earlier slide, I shared you there is a lack of distribution master plan. So through this project, we are now preparing distribution master plan. So I earlier mentioned the need of the move from the grant to credit or subsidy to credit-based model. So we are now putting some resources to use as a credit line to promote this mini hydro systems. So and we are also like developing mini hydro systems which will be grid ready. So such kind of technology innovations also we are introducing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pushkar. It's great to hear about the work that ADB is. Quite impressive the number of mini grids that you all are developing in Nepal and around the region, and that you're also actually making plans for grid extension, because I know that this is a question that a lot of companies do wrestle with in the mini grid space. Last but certainly not least, we're going to hear from Aruna Waniachi. Runa is a senior energy specialist within the Southeast Asia Regional Department of ADB. In this role, she supports ADB's energy sector operations in Southeast Asia. Prior to joining ADB, Aruna worked with the Ceylon Electricity Board in Sri Lanka and the United Nations Development Program in Iraq and in Jordan. She's a total of 25 years of experience in this energy space. Looking forward to hearing your presentation, Aruna.
Thank you, Modi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to present a very successful project we supported in Vietnam. The presentation is organized this way: the background and the key features of the project, beneficiaries, challenges, and the lessons of the project. Let me start stating our vision. Our dream is to free Asia and the Pacific free of poverty. The population who are not having electricity and other basic services are living in very remote, rural, sparsely populated remote areas across the globe, where poorest of poor, deprived women and other marginally disadvantaged population living. This is where the low literacy exists, the women, children, double burden, lack of education, health facilities, and other issues due to lack of basic services. We development agencies have targets, the governments have targets to improve the lives of these deprived population across the globe. In these efforts, let me say, power sector has a unique opportunity to reach out and improve the lives of marginally disadvantaged population living in those areas through education, skills building, and also providing livelihood enhancement programs, together with providing access to energy through developing the renewable energy resources available in these local areas. The project, let me talk about Vietnam. The project is in Vietnam. It is a country with 94 million population. The access to energy was 50% in 2005, and it's now 98%. The 2% remaining percentage is very tiny number, but the number of people without having electricity in Vietnam are 1.5 million. It's more than 1.5 million. And to not only that, those 1.5 million population are living in the border areas near Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and southern China. They are mainly ethnic minority. Almost all the population living in those border areas are ethnic minority people. The government has a very ambitious program to provide universal access to population in Vietnam by 2020. And in that government program, we are supporting to provide electricity access to 1,000 poorest communes in 9 provinces. Those provinces are highlighted in this map in the north and in the south. In the center, we have 5 provinces, and in Mekong Delta, we have 2 provinces in the south. The project we are supporting has 2 loan components and 2 grant components. The project loan components include development of 5 small hydropower plants in scattered locations with total capacity of 30 megawatts. And the second component is expansion of the grid to provide the access to electricity in those remote areas. These 2 components we integrated in one project to make the project viable, because extension of this last mile is really difficult and not always financially viable. And also this small hydro, the potential is in very far away places where grid access is not available, the excess power cannot be evacuated, and it's just the mini grid can be an option, but the locality, the context of those areas, there's very sparsely populated communities living in those areas, and the potential of those the small hydropower plants will not be utilized unless the grid, there is a provision for evacuating excess power. So these 2 components actually complement each other, and the project is a very economically, financially viable project. And the project also has 2 very needed components, grant components. We provided 3 million grant. There are very poor households in those areas. Although the network is extended and access is available, those people cannot have the means to do the house wiring and to connect to the grid. Therefore, we provided 3 million grant, and 50,000 households will be benefited from that grant. In addition, we provided a technical assistance grant, $250,000 grant to provide livelihood enhancement programs. Unless we go beyond that meter and implement these livelihood programs, the outcome will not be realized in time. We also used a very unique mechanism to disburse the grant. We used an output-based aid mechanism, because these household wiring and connecting to the households, the main grid, are very small contracts, and so it's very difficult to do the process-based disbursement, so we use the output-based aid mechanism where utility to provide pre-finance either by commercial loans, and once they implement, we verify the delivery of the service connections and we disburse the grant. And eligibility criteria for the grant, as indicated, the poor and the female-headed, disabled, and ethnic minority people. It's very easy to identify eligible households in Vietnam because the Ministry of Labor and Invalid and Social Affairs has lists every year. They update the list, and we can easily verify the eligibility. And project is almost completed. It's the closing date is 31st December this year. The loan, two components, the mini hydro and the grid extension, already provided access to electricity for 150,000 households. 40,000 more households will be connected in the coming period. The mini hydro, one mini hydro project is completed and 4 are in progress. The grant component also, as I said, it's 40,000 to 50,000 beneficiaries, and we already provided 15,000 households with the subsidy, the service connection. 25,000 more will be connected in the coming months. The technical assistance, we engaged NGO to do those trainings, the livelihood enhancement programs, and also guiding those ethnic minority people who do not have much knowledge on livelihood programs, how to access the credits and how to use those financing facilities to improve their productive work. And we have not forgotten also to train the trainers so that those people can approach their own people in the future after the training is completed. And if we talk about the challenges, 2 key challenges are the challenges from the beneficiaries itself due to their low literacy level and other unique social characteristics. It was very difficult to convince them about the project and the benefits. We had to do lots of consultation, rigorous consultation. Fortunately, there are lots of women's associations and the farmers' unions which are very active in those areas. So we approached them, we coordinated with them, we managed to convince the population living in those areas and to provide the training and other things to do to implement the project. And the other side is the utility. The utilities' priorities are not these livelihood programs. Utilities' priorities are to generate, transmit, distribute, and collect the revenue from their business. So it's new to them. So it was so much of work for us to convince the utility the requirement of livelihood programs. And now by doing, they also learned and benefited from this project. The lessons, while this project was utility-driven and combined grid extension and renewable energy generation, it is a good case study to learn how such an intervention could be turned into a successful business case for a mini grid project. It's very useful for us because we are now preparing another project to support Vietnam government to increase the access to electricity. It's 360 million project in the coming period we're going to approve. And in that, it's extending the grid is no longer vital because it's really the last mile, which is very difficult. So we thinking about more mini grids. It will be the option going forward, and also bringing independent power producers to develop in partnership with those local communities to develop those mini grids and operate and maintain. Thank you.
Thank you, Aruna. It was really great to hear about the work that ADB is doing in this space, especially addressing a much needed area, the really remote areas that not as many people tend to focus on. So it's great to see this project moving forward. Okay, so now we're going to move to a discussion section, and I'm not going to call it question and answer because I really want to make sure that our panelists are very engaged and it's turning into somewhat of a conversation. So we'll do this maybe for the next 15 minutes or so, and then we'll turn it over to the audience, and hopefully we can have a back and forth dialogue. So I'm first going to throw out the initial question that I would love for all of you to respond to, and please, bounce ideas off of one another as you respond. So this question touches on sort of the government and policy space. In many cases, regulatory and policy environments are not specifically designed for the off-grid mini-grid space. What do you think that governments can do to allow flexibility of technology, financing, project size, and business models in your work? So whoever wants to go first, take it away.
Sure, I'll go first. One of the biggest obstacles I think that you see in some countries, not every country, is a national policy that says, well, the remote areas tend to be poorer, so they can't have to pay more for electricity than their cousins in the city pay. So if on the other hand, if they're using kerosene now, they're paying maybe up 10 to 100 times more for the same level of energy services. So they would gladly pay a high price for small quantities of modern electricity. But by limiting the tariff to the same as the urban rate, they make it an unprofitable venture for a private sector person to come in. And if the government is subsidizing it, it becomes an unsustainable fiscal burden. So, and this issue of promoting energy efficiency, if they're paying a low price, they're not going to use efficient appliances. So I see that as a huge obstacle in that improper policies are inhibiting rural electrification with the best of intentions, but by not allowing companies to charge what it really costs.
Yeah, I'll add to what Peter said, right? So in my experience, usually like while charging tariff and deciding on what is the right rate, we usually look at two rates, right? So one is the displaced cost. So how much were they initially paying versus how much are they paying right now after the mini grid was installed? And that has to be less than what they were currently paying, right? So paying before, and usually with kerosene that works out. And on top of that, with the productive end use loads, what we began to see is like in addition to displaced costs, there is also generated revenue factor, right? So if you generate more, you pay more. And with my examples, I talked about like how, if you talk about cost per kilowatt hour numbers and get too hung up on that, it does not make that much of a sense. But people are making way too much margins just by charging for service, say per kg of grinding or per liter of water sold. So there is definitely an opportunity there. And on top of that, I'd also like, while talking about government policies, I'd like to add on to the fact that, usually what happens is people, so developing projects and getting them financed, it's sort of like a chicken and an egg problem, right? So which do you do first? So as a developer, I'm always conflicted with, develop a project, wait for a couple of years, and then probably it might happen. So that's not how it usually works in the field, because people get impatient, their costs of going back and forth, maintaining a community warm. So, I mean, if that process could be facilitated and made it to happen much faster, I think that would be a big help. That's me speaking as a private developer.
I think my biggest thing is, which both of you can already touched on, is most of the regulation only focuses on let's provide electricity, energy access. Nobody's looking at a holistic view of it, which is how do we provide equal opportunity for growth, either on economic growth or increasing the quality of life. It's not just about energy access, right? It's about if we give them energy, how do they grow? And then on the same note, but very separate, the regulations also never look at providing something else that for private developer, you're already doing it. But not very many other business models are combining other services with providing energy. We all know, or many of us probably know, that you can probably provide clean water for cents, per liter. And people are paying, probably $1 a liter, right? You combine that profit margin versus, plus the usually small profit margin of providing electricity, and as a project, now it becomes a reasonable return on the investment. but the electricity and the water price on themselves not too expensive, which is touching on your point. So thanks.
Yeah, two things. Just Peter already mentions this tariff is very, very critical, and I personally think that the regulatory regimes should allow this tariff regimes to go beyond this tariff, normal tariff set by the utility, because that may not be too much competitive or too much interesting for the private sector to get in as in mini-grid systems. That is one. And another, just I would like to elaborate more on this, the standardizations, as I earlier mentioned in my slides. So this in this regulatory regime, so while we standardize, while we impose such kind of standards to the private mini-grid operators, so it should be like a simplified. But if you go for very complicated, for very like a customized type of things, then it will create more bottlenecks to these operators. So this need to be streamlined. This need to be standardized, simplified, and most. I also think that these all standards should be made public, so that the process, the private sector understand what his requirements, these things, and another thing is this recognitions of these mini-grid operators. So as of now, like in Nepal, there is no such kind of provisions are there. So but this regulatory and other policy regimes should recognize and outlines the right of mini-grids operators in this access front. So these are the things that I would like to highlight. Thank you.
I wanted to add a little bit that we do have to be careful on the regulatory side, that if you push too much on standardization of the technology of what types or what specific things that are too specific, you'll kind of you'll kill the growth. So you're going to have to balance out between, let's standardize something, but I think if you can standardize on the purpose rather than the technology, I think that's a much better approach.
Yes, I agree.
And how do you propose, what would you propose a solution to actually do?
You mean on the purpose kind of thing? I think he's already, Pushkar already mentioned it, let's make sure that when possible, when it makes sense, and we have to kind of do a little bit of study on it, but maybe the purpose could be that mini grids of over a certain size need to be utility, at utility level, that they are ready to be connected to the utility. Maybe not the controller yet, but perhaps the distribution is ready for it. And if we're talking regulation, why not make the utility company with subsidy from the government build the distribution network to their standard already, so the developer is not responsible for distribution, but just like any other developer, not mini grid, they're only responsible for generation. Lots of other ones are like that.
And Aruna, what do you think in terms of, you really look at those remote areas, the poorest of the poor, what would you recommend the governments do, that can really draw attention to these spaces as well and make sure that they're getting the finances and resources that they need also to develop these systems in the really remote, the most remote areas?
In Vietnam, actually, they have these lifeline tariffs and a lot of concessionary means for the poor people to use it, to pay the electricity bills and everything. So it's not an issue in this project. But ADB is actually, when we develop the project, we incorporate all these elements, looking after the social assessment, after assessing the social aspects of the population. So we include all these inputs in our project design. That's where we add value also.
So I'd like to shift a little bit and bring in a topic that we all met yesterday and had sort of a lively discussion as we were preparing for today. So I'd like to bring up one of the topics we were discussing yesterday, which is the importance of talking about energy efficiency when you're talking about energy access. Very often they're looked at as two different spaces, and even here at this forum, there's an energy efficiency track and there's an energy access track. And while it's important to really focus in both areas, there's really a need to merge the two conversations. People are not purchasing electrons; they're purchasing those, end services, and so it's important to get quality assured, super efficient appliances out there on the market. But oftentimes, when you build the mini grid system, the quality assured products are not available, and they're not always packaged together. You'll have companies that are just selling the appliances and companies that are just selling the systems. So how would you all recommend, from the analytical work that you do at Homer to the whole system planning size to actually implementation of the mini grid systems? And I know that you all are also looking at this in terms of a packaged way, but for companies that don't necessarily sell the appliance with the mini grid system, how do you ensure that the efficiency of the appliances is actually being matched with the mini grid systems that are being developed?
Well, I'll answer with one word: technology. So I designed a mini, well, it's a microgrid in Papua, but it can easily be extended to my mini grid. And one of the ways to encourage that, and actually to teach, really, is to have an energy limiter. So they get a daily quota of energy, and they can feel it. It's very difficult for all of us, for any of us, to explain, even to somebody who's well educated. Oh yeah, 1 kilowatt hour means 3 hours of this and 2 hours of that. But if you only use 2 hours of this, that means 3 hours of this. It's such a big mix, right? So giving them a specific quota per day, once they kind of experience that, oh, I run out after this, I run out after this, it kind of gets them in the mind, and then they'll be asking for energy efficient appliances. Just one way anyway.
Well, I already weighed in on, as sort of the economist, saying, well, you just price it right and you give people the right incentives. And it's not really fair, because they also have to have access to the appliances. And they also have to have understanding. It takes some understanding. And so a combination of what you just said, where, yeah, we have a threshold, and you get, and maybe you get cut off, but if you want more, you can turn it back on, but now you're paying the full price. You got, before that, you were getting a very low rate. But I have an anecdote which I think illustrates the issue. When you have, because I've seen this, villages that already have a diesel, and it runs for a few hours in the evening, and when the diesel comes on, the lights come on, and when it's time to turn the lights off, they turn the diesel off. So the people don't even need a light switch in that village. And a light switch is your most fundamental energy efficient technology, right? And if you have a part-time diesel, you don't even need light switches. And the diesel actually prefers to be loaded fully rather than lightly loaded. So there's no incentive, reverse incentive, to do energy efficiency. And if you want to come into that village and say, okay, the diesel's not providing good power, it's only in the evening, it's expensive, et cetera, let's do a renewable microgrid, give you 24-hour power, but everybody's got incandescent lighting or electric water heaters I've seen in villages, and they go, well, if it's going to be ridiculously expensive to build a mini grid unless we do energy efficiency. They go, oh, it's hard enough to develop the mini grid, and you want us to come in with LPG distribution to replace their electric hot water, et cetera, or electric cook stoves. So sorry, that's not a solution, but I think it highlights the problem, that there's such a big difference in the cost structure between a diesel system and a hybrid renewable system, and that needs to be reflected in the way we think about these systems. It's a capacity building problem. If people understood this better, it would make life a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that was our motivation behind us taking not just solar but appliances along with it, right? Just tagging those two together. Because if I were to go to that village, and so for example, the picture that I showed you earlier, the water pump being operated by diesel generator, if I just took the diesel generator out and powered it with solar, there was no way I was going to beat the cost that he was currently incurring. It would have been much higher. So what we do is we take an energy efficient appliance along with the solar. So that is how we usually beat their existing cost, because not only are they using a diesel generator, which is not a good source of energy, but then it's running very inefficiently, and that's why the energy costs are high. So with energy efficient appliances along with the energy that you're supplying, you can actually be much cheaper compared to conventional sources of energy.
I just want to say that's actually a great point, and
There's the way you provide the energy efficient appliances along with it is a great way. But we just have to look at, in your cases that they work, but in other cases, in the poorest where you can't reach it, how do we then get to there? So what we do have to look at is many different models, many different business models where we can reach all the different tiers of energy access, that are required in different ways to do it. So just don't be stuck to anything. And again, I'm looking at it from a policy standpoint, but as a project developer, as a business developer, don't be stuck to one model.
And Aruna, what do you think about that point? The fact that in these remote areas, it can be very difficult to get these efficient appliances out there. So if you build a mini grid, what do you do if the appliances aren't available?
Again, in Vietnam, actually, and many other countries, these energy labeling programs are in place and implemented in parallel. In these livelihood programs, we can do something to make the population aware about this energy efficient equipment. In ADB, of course, when we do the projects, actually project developers have a big responsibility in designing the projects, incorporating all these elements, not only energy efficiency, the renewable energy, advanced technologies, whether they follow the standards, whether there are standards in the country, the utilities or the private sector. All these elements we consider in project design actually. Why we do retrofitting projects now? Because we were not efficient in the past, so at least we should not repeat our bad practices in designing poor projects. So all these elements should be integrated in the projects, and when we do the development agencies, the difference between other projects and our projects is we have a very rigorous policies and procedures in ensuring that they are efficient projects.
Thanks. And Pushkar, how have you looked at this in your mini grid?
Yeah, in energy efficiency front, especially in this demand side management, I see like a very encouraging trend, at least in Nepal, for recently installed systems. If you see the appliances being used, those appliances already they are being using already like highly efficient appliances, so as they have been now like shifting away from even from CFL to LED for television, very low power consuming, very energy efficient appliances. But like if you see the in holistic manner of, you see the total power consumptions of this household, particular household in rural context, this electricity is consuming only maybe like less than 5% of their total energy need, and this more than 95% of this energy requirement is for the cooking needs, and they have been using this cooking, burning fuel in very inefficient cooking stoves with the efficiency less than 10%. So until and unless we try to resolve this issue, then we cannot have major shift in energy efficiency front. And while we design this energy efficiency, I think it's now time to think also that earlier we engineers were very much scared to design the systems that meet our cooking demand. But like without it, I think it's not going to help. And not only this technical things, others like other issues, cross-cutting issues like this environment problems and other gender and social inclusion issues. Until and unless we resolve these issues, then we will not be able to achieve this, even the emerging this energy efficiency issues and other cross-cutting issues like this.
So we have about 5 minutes left.
Just make a quick comment about.
Oh yeah.
I completely agree that this the three tracks we have on energy access, energy efficiency, and renewable energy are somewhat arbitrary. And we actually, in designing the energy access track, we did float this idea of having an energy efficiency for energy access session. We didn't get one abstract submitted on that, which suggests that even though there are some really interesting examples out there, experience is still really limited. So I thought that was quite indicative, because I think it's a hot topic conceptually, but in practice, it still hasn't reached that critical mass where we can get even one submission at a minor level.
I think that's a great point. I heard the same thing. There was only one abstract submitted for the efficiency for access space, and so we ended up not having a session on it. However, every time that I've raised it with individuals here, people seem to be very passionate about the area. So I think that there's the interest. It's just growing. But I've been told that next year there will be a deep dive workshop, and the entire workshop focused on this specific space. So hopefully, that'll be a full group next year. So we have a little bit of time left, not a lot, but what we're going to do now is open it up to questions from the audience. And given that we don't have too much time, we're going to take maybe 4 questions at once, and then we'll just let the panelists respond to whichever ones they feel comfortable responding to. Given the interest of time here, I ask that you please not make a comment, but rather a direct question. So if you do have a comment, please make it in 20 seconds, but really focus on just the question for the panelists. Yes?
Ed Piemonte from Philippines. I'd like to address my question to Madam Aruna. You mentioned about the financial assistance that you are extending to the poorest of the poor in Vietnam in order to avail of the household electric service for the nation. I would like to know what is the component of your loan extended to the household, and also the component of the grant. And if it is a loan, the terms and conditions of the loan. And I will highly appreciate very much if you can talk a little about the collection efficiency out of the loan given by the households.
Great, thank you. And I think that we have another question up here at the front.
For Andre, you mentioned you saw about 300 to 400 business models in Nepal. In your opinion, is there something like an ideal business model? Do you have a prescriptive model, or do you think that it is different model for different requirement? And how do you suggest, or do you, in your mind, do you have any best practices that you would recommend? Thanks.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? We're just going to do this one round of questions.
Hi, I'm Shubhato Mukherjee from Tata Power Delhi in India. I just wanted to ask that, as it was mentioned during the discussion, that there are lifeline consumers in almost every country. We call it somewhere below poverty line customer, somewhere in lifeline consumer. But in most of the countries, these consumers are given subsidy in their electricity consumption when they're using the electricity from the distribution grid or from the distribution company. Now, if we extend similar type of subsidy for mini grid operators when they are providing supply to these customers, then it will make a much more economically viable mini grid model. So, any thought on this, or I would request the panel to comment on this, that if it can be implemented, or if it is already implemented in any of the country, then please share the details. Thank you.
And I think we have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, I'm Bill Gallery. I'm working on an ADB mini-grid project in Myanmar. I think this question is most for Anjal, but maybe Pushkar, you might have some insight too. You had mentioned that in Nepal, most companies seem to be EPCs and not really comfortable with going the service provider route, which is exactly the same issue we see in Myanmar. And I'm wondering if there's something that moved you to be more of an energy service provider, or what is getting in the way of more companies making that shift?
Excellent, thanks. Okay, so just let the panelists each respond, and please, if you can, keep your answers brief, since we're very nearly approaching the end right here.
All right, I'll go first. So just really quickly to plug, I know this is an ADB event, but I'm going to plug GIZ a little bit. So part of the work that I did to be able to access those number of villages is that we work with the GIZ worked with the Ministry of Energy to inspect the government-funded mini grids. So you can actually, it's easiest if you just go to my LinkedIn, and I have a post linking you to the GIZ report. So you can read that, and you have quite a bit of data there based on a lot of different experiences. Ideal business model, the one that I want to see, especially if I approach it from how can the regulators and government help this space,
is what we've talked about earlier, which is results based. On an IPP basis, make the developer spend the money up front, and pay them on a kilowatt hour basis. As long as it's running, you get paid on it. Now, one way I like to do this is actually on an NPV basis. So I know there's a component of subsidy that's going to be required to make this really easy to implement. So let's look at a maximum of 30%, just a number, maximum of 30% CapEx, and the rest of it is tariff, whatever tariff that you want. So using the same tool that everybody uses on the same discount rate, on the tender, you make everybody say, how much CapEx subsidy do you want, and what is the tariff? And then you kind of bring it back into a net present value, and the cheapest net present value wins the tender. And in that case, it's a good balance of CapEx subsidy versus tariff, right? So that's one way of getting it, to make sure that the developer, the company who installs a mini grid is there to manage it, to make sure it's running for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And then best practices, I think the biggest best practice is that if you don't have monitoring, if you don't have a way to look, a way for the villagers to report to a central place where, hey, my system's working, my system's not working, it's going to fall apart, especially on places where you don't have this kind of IPP model where they get paid on a kilowatt hour basis. So, thanks.
Let me respond to the question by the gentleman from Philippines. This loan is actually provided to the utility, not to the households, and the payback period is 25 years, and it's a concessional rate. Our ADB OCR loan, we use floating rate, and it's about between 1.5% to 2%. The grant, of course, that 3 million grant was provided for the service connection, and it's a grant. And we assessed before providing the loan of the possibility of paying back repayment. And all the beauty of having this kind of projects is it's utility driven, so utility connects the energy meters, and we assess the ability of these people to pay their energy bills. And Vietnam government has a subsidy for very poor people. They pay 30,000 dong per month for them to buy kerosene. So that will be used to pay the electricity bill. So it's a sustainable project. I can provide more details after this session. I'll see you.
So regarding this, the service provider, private sector is limiting itself as equipment suppliers and emerging as an energy service provider. So one of the reasons could be, like, at least in Nepal, like what I saw is due to this policy bottlenecks, the private sector is not emerging as from these equipment suppliers to energy service provider. So the subsidy is not allowed to be channelized to the private sector. This is the one reason. So, but now, like, recently approved the subsidy policies that was approved recently by the government of Nepal. So there is a provisions that the subsidy will be provided in terms of kilowatt hour generators for rural energy access, and that can be like eligible private sector eligible. So with that provision, I hope the private sector who has been engaged in this sector for such a long as equipment suppliers, it's the right time, like it's a very good opportunity for them to emerge or to elevate themselves as a service provider.
I'd like to add to that, right? I did a whole session on transitioning from an EPC to energy service a couple of days ago, and there was this gentleman who asked me a great question. He asked whether or not am I ready to take 500 of these projects on my balance sheet, and am I happy with that? And I answered him no, right? Because the problem with microgrid is especially with the ones that we're doing, is they're being sustained completely because of the productive end use loads. The day they stop consuming energy, my profit drops. If it's a BTS tower, like it's guaranteed and they've signed a 10-year contract, and after that, if the policies are clear, like when the grid arrives, what happens? What's the subsidy that I'm getting? If all those chinks are clear and open, it gives me confidence to make more investment and undertake more of these projects. But with productive load and end use load which are uncertain, and so that gives me less confidence to undertake more of these projects. So like I said, what I have to ensure is guaranteed consumption and guaranteed payment collection, right? So if those two things can be ensured, I think more and more companies would enter this space, and couple that with the government policies of exit options and structured subsidies, that would really encourage private players to jump into this sector, I think.
Can I ask a quick question? So instead of a repayment guarantee to you, the project developer, would it help if it's a guaranteed repayment to the bank, to the lender, so that you're still responsible for everything? Because if, again, just thinking, if everything is a subsidy, then it's going to fail at some point.
Of course. So I think like one of the gentlemen, he asked a great question, like what is the right model, right? I don't know what the right model is, but at least what we have found would work is the fact that if you get the community to invest some portion of equity into the project, it sort of brings a sense of ownership, right? So I'm totally against higher grant percentage going into the project. I believe that there should be some equity element going into the project, but what guarantees maximum uptake of the produced energy? That needs to be guaranteed, and I think that would sort of encourage more developers to jump in, I feel.
Nope. Okay. I think we're just about 5 minutes over time here, so I want to turn it over to Davida to see if you have any wrap-up or conclusions you'd like to make before we head out for the break.
Far be it from me to stand between you and the coffee break. So I'll just put in a plug for the next session, which is going to focus on renewable mini-grids for islands, which is going. Obviously, we'll have a sharper focus on that specific context. So thank you very much for coming, and see you in the next session.
Sorry.